Well, it seems with all the political entities involved with a lot of religion today, a lot of them are using that as the basis of their platform to get elected. And to me, that's not a good basis to base your election. You should have moral values as well as your physical values, what you want to do for the people. But when a lot of the politicians, as you know, are asked for a religious stance or a religious stand on a certain view, they absolutely shut up.
Well, the problem is, again, one of the premises of our whole show from week to week. What we have is pragmatic politicians, and all the parties that are in the power that have elected officials currently are pragmatic parties. So what they do is they keep polling the public and finding out what the public wants, and then they say they'll vote for what the majority wants so that they can get into power. But a principled party would say, we believe in this no matter what. For instance, a principled party was the Communist Party. We don't believe in what they teach, so there's nobody elected from the Communist Party. But at least they hold to their principles, that they believe in that method of thinking, and the public get a choice to decide whether they want that or not. And the Christian Heritage Party has said right out, our country is from the heritage of Christianity, so we believe that we should keep that heritage in our country. And so they're principled, and they're not overly getting elected either. They haven't gotten an official in yet. But they will not change their stance on many of the criteria that are moral issues, because they see God as having supremacy over those moral issues. And they believe in the Constitution. In fact, they're the only one that does, because they believe in the supremacy of God. So that if the country is telling you to do something that God tells you not to do, they would tell you to follow what God teaches and not what your country teaches.
What's your opinion? What's your opinion about that, Harold? About politicians not really stating their stance on a certain religious view, because it can lead to their downfall if they're on a roll, if they're winning in the polls.
Yes.
But as soon as they come forth with their religious stand and religious views, it can lead right to their downfall.
Well, I trace all of this really back to the religion that has taken over the Western world. Mm-hmm. And it is, their religion has become Darwinian evolution. Mm-hmm. And that's really basically posited that there is no creator, there's no intelligent designer, that everything came about through vast periods of time by chance, by accident, and that we are simply the product of blind fate. There is no intelligent creator, and that is basically our society's view. So the schools today glory in the fact that they are humanistic. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, Darwin's philosophy, his evolutionary theory, if it can be called a theory, his hypothesis, actually states that, in essence, that man is the apex of all creation, and he has evolved into this. And so what do we get in our world today? We get no absolutes. There's no basis for moral value once you take out a religious basis, and it has been Judeo-Christian in the Western world. So when I was teaching high school, if I could just throw in a comment about my own experience, I delighted in teaching concerning books that presented the evolutionary theory. Wyndham's wonderful sci-fi books and the chrysalids and so on, and I would come across a passage in them where evolutionary theory would be presented, or some other theory, and I would say, I don't believe in evolution at all. And my students would gasp. I can still remember looking at them, you know, usually about 30, 35 students in the class. But Mr. McCarthy, Dr. McCarthy, you're a high school teacher. You're a university graduate. And don't you know that evolution is a fact? Mm-hmm. And I would say, okay, that's your view. Let's just examine that for a moment. And I would give them 3 points. And I really never had anybody challenge me on this. The first point that I would present to them is, and being an English teacher, I like alliteration, so I'd say the fossil column is false. Wow. See, that's really still Darwin's basic view that the fossil column presents proof that over long periods of time, and in his time he thought 400 million years, and now they believe that for the solar system or the universe it's about 17 billion or for the universe 17 billion, for the solar system about 4.5 billion. But that over huge periods of time that life came from extremely, well, first of all, where did it come from? But the most primitive forms of life, little blobs of life, gradually advance up this fossil column. And you see the fossil columns in the textbook, but you don't find them in nature. That's my first point. The fossil column does not exist, except in the textbooks. For instance, you find the most primitive, supposedly the most primitive forms of life, sea life, on the tops of mountain ranges all over the world. And the so-called fossil column, or geological column, contains fossils that are all mixed up with regard to this Darwinian time period. And that was the first point, the fossil column is false. But my second point was this, and this is telling. The very most basic point that evolution, proof or evidence that evolution says that it has, is that species evolve from one species into another. And you cannot find a single proven example of that. Not a single one. You know, if the evolutionary textbooks, for instance, say that the snakes evolved into birds, you know, that they slid down mountain slopes or mudslides or ice slides, and their scales turned into feathers, and then they developed wings and so on. If that sort of thing took place, and I've actually read that in one evolutionary textbook, if that sort of thing took place, then what we should have in the fossil column is literally trillions of intermediate forms, gradually developing from creatures that were almost all snake and beginning to be bird, up until you've got creatures that are almost all bird and very little snake. We should be up to our armpits in what they're called transitional forms. I have a letter from one of the greatest evolutionary scholars in the world, Dr. Colin Patterson, who was a senior paleontologist at the London Museum of Natural History in London, England. And I have a signed letter by him stating, it's a copy of a signed letter, photocopy, in which he stated that he could not give one example, one definite proof of a transitional form. Maybe Archaeopteryx, he said, but that's another story. But we should be up to our armpits in them. There should be billions of them. And here is the guy that was, if not one of the greatest experts in the world on fossils and on paleontology. And he said, I can't give you one. So here is the first point. The fossil column is false. And then my next point, being alliterative as an English teacher, I would say hominids are a hoax. And you know, since Darwin's time, they have not only been trying to find the missing links, but mainly they've been trying to find the one main missing link, the link between monkeys and men, apes and men. It's interesting to notice that there have been hundreds and thousands of attempts to find these missing links. And everywhere you go, you find that they're hoaxes. Like, we're all probably familiar, when I started university, they exposed the Dawsonian man, what was the name of the Dawson's, the students had...
Was it Piltdown?
The Piltdown man. The students had taken a skull and they treated it with acid, they'd filed the teeth, and they made it look like a hominid, a half man, half ape. And you know, you've got so many others. For instance, the Java man is one of the most unusual, where Dr. Eugene Dubois was hired by the Dutch government. He was a Frenchman who was hired by the Dutch government to search for the missing link in Java. So it's called Java man. And he was running out of funds in 1893, approximately, and he suddenly discovered bones that were bones of a monkey type creature, and parts of skull of human, and teeth and so on. They always like teeth. And he put these together, and he put put out plaster casts of these all over the world, and both creationists and evolutionists said, well, these aren't the same creature. Oh yes, yes, and he put out more exact plaster casts of these, and he put the originals in a safe in Haarlem and in Holland. And in, what was it, about 1930, this was in 1893 when he first claimed this. 1933, on his deathbed, he finally admitted that they were two different creatures. Part of it was a gibbon and part of it was a human being. That was a fact. I think one of the most startling concerns the Scopes trial in 1925 in Dayton, Tennessee. And you probably all have heard of that, and there's a movie, Inherit the Wind, based on that, which is practically all lies about it, twisted. But rather interesting. You remember that one of the prime evidences that Clarence Darrow, the atheist lawyer, gave was a tooth that they said they had found. It was named after one of the states in the United States. Was it Arkansas, man, or something like that? And they said, here is evidence of a creature that was part man and part ape or part monkey. And they developed this. That was one of the big things that helped the evolutionary theory to be promoted at that trial. And even though the jury, being in the Bible Belt country, part of the country in the United States, gave the decision to William Jennings Bryant, the creationist Bible-believing defendant, that was broadcast all over the world, the first trial broadcast all over the world, and people in general felt that Darrow, the evolutionist, had won. And they found later that tooth is simply a tooth that belongs to a monkey-like creature, or no, a pig-like creature, a pig-like creature, and still existent.
Through DNA evidence, recently discovered
in the Amazon Valley. So hominids are a hoax, plaster of Paris and artists' conceptions and so on. And the last one, they would say, oh, but Mr. McCarthy, what about carbon-14? Haven't you heard about this? The world is millions and billions of years old. So I would say, well, let's look at the third point here. First of all, we have the fossil column is false. There isn't a fossil column anywhere except in textbooks. There are no absolute proofs at all of transitional beings between one species and another. There are all kinds of mutations, but no example that's ever been proven of one species turning into another, because God, according to Genesis, made everything according to its kind.